way, way behind. First of all, tell us what you perceive of this report, and then you explain the nitty-gritties to us.
Well, thank you very much. On one hand, it's worrying. On the other hand, worrying. What I mean by it should not be worrying is the fact that generally people will put an interpretation to it to mean that it shows Ghanaians are not intelligent, but that is not so. IQ does not necessarily measure native or, native intelligence or your inborn intelligence. It does not necessarily measure that. However, it does measure your intellectual abilities and potentials, your ability to use your reasoning, all that. But this is not necessarily the same as your native or inborn intelligence. So if we understand what IQ measures, then you will not be too worried about that. On the other hand, it's worrying because in spite of everything, it's a measure of our reasoning capacity. And that is the worrying component of it. But I will explain all that further. So IQ, intelligence quotient, as I said, measures your intellectual abilities and potentials. However, how do we measure IQ? IQ is measured along some 3, 4, 5 domains. Your visual, spatial, that is how you are able to perceive your space. And then your verbal comprehension, how you understand issues. And your fluid reasoning, how you are able to reason. And your cognitive functions. Now, all these domains, actually, before you get them out, it requires the person's ability to understand words that he is provided to show his understanding and how he's able to even draw some figures. Now, these texts actually are based on issues that are quite alien to us, not exactly familiar to us. So indeed, often what we do is that if you measure, even at the clinic, when you measure IQ, then we do what we call normalize. We find the norm according to our situation to see how it can compare. Because if you measure IQ and directly you measure somebody's IQ and you get a certain figure, 90, and you decide that, or it could even be 80, 70, and you decide that it means this person is profoundly deficient, you might be deceived. So you need to find the norm. Now, over there, when they are doing the world competitive scaling, they won't know our norm, and therefore they will not normalize it for us. They will just take what it is for everywhere. In that case, that will bring us quite low. So there is a certain defect in the IQ use because it does not take into consideration the norms of the particular countries. But this also raises concern, a challenge to us, that we need to be able to normalize or even find the equivalent values of our IQ system. The other thing that is very important is that the visual space, verbal comprehension, cognitive abilities, and all this fluid reasoning, it depends on your ability to understand the words that are being put to you. And we reason in what we call concepts. As we are talking, I do the reasoning in my mind, and then I come out with the equivalent words. Now that reasoning goes through what we call concepts. Concepts are symbolic representation in the mind of an idea, of an item or a place. So if I say that is a man, man is a concept representing an adult male human being. A shirt is a concept that represents something that a man or somebody can wear. Writing is a concept that shows what we can do with our pen. Now, if I put all these concepts together, like the man wearing a shirt is writing, I put these concepts together, then I come up with an idea that is reasoning linearly. Now, if I have not been helped to form my concepts right from the very beginning, then I'll be deficient, I'll be defective in my ability to reason. So when it comes to verbal fluid reasoning, I will be found to be a little defective just because I have not been schooled right from it in the very beginning. And that's a challenge that we have in our part of the world, that we are taught in a second language, a language that we are not used to, and we have not been able to build the concepts right from the very beginning. So when we come to using the concepts to show some other reality, then we are found wanting. The cure of it is that we must once we have agreed that we are using English as a language, official language, if we can't change it, then we must teach our children right from the very beginning to build the concepts so that the concepts become part of their second nature. And they don't have to think in vernacular before they translate into English, which is what happens to many people. We think in vernacular, well, sorry for the use of the word vernacular, but we think in our local language and then translate into the English language and then bring it out. So when there's a certain blockade, what we call thought gap, when there's a certain blockade in my reasoning, my translating into English, then I'm found wanting, then I'll be stammering for words. That is because we've not built our concepts. A typical thing is that when we dream, what language do you dream in? The language you dream in is a language that is a second nature to you, that you are so familiar with it that it flows naturally. But if you dream and you don't dream in English and you are always dreaming in Twi, which is fine, but what it means is that you have not been able to acquire the English language sufficiently. So when it comes to concept formation, you find your concepts in vernacular and then translate into English, and then you are found wanted. So generally, that is the IQ concept. It's on one hand to let us appreciate that it is not exactly normalized to our situation. On the other hand, to also let us understand that we will need to find a way of reforming our educational system to lay adequate emphasis on whatever language we will use and build our concepts in the language right from the very beginning.
Prof, I accept your explanation to this, but it is the same norm that was used to measure countries like Togo, Mali, Niger. These are, in quotes, impoverished countries. Or, I mean, we, in terms of our performance, we seem to be doing much better than these countries. So how come they were measured with the same norm? How come they even did better than us?
With the French-speaking countries, they learn French through assimilation. So right from the very beginning, they form the concepts in the language. So if you go to, let's say, the market, the open market in Ajamo or a French-speaking country, Togo, whatever, the average person in the market speaks French, even if Creole French, some form of French. Because right from the very beginning, he or she was taught in that language and he or she assimilated it from the very beginning. So they are able to form their concepts right from the very beginning. We were not taught that way. We later grew to learn it. And so you will see even graduates struggling with our language ability. So what I mean is that the reform should get us to appreciate that either we are going to use a local language, which I'm sure now with the global language we cannot. But then the language of formal instruction, we should be exposed to it right from the very beginning.
But you find most educators saying that when children are taught in their local language, it helps them to better even speak English or understand the concepts in English. But with this report, it's rather challenging us to rather teach the children right from the beginning in English so that they can appreciate the concepts.
That's the point I'm making. Indeed, children learn, as I said with the French people, they learn through assimilation. Children learn languages through assimilation. It becomes part and parcel of this. So it's not uncommon to see a Ghanaian 5-year-old child speaking 4 languages. Based on where he lives, maybe in Accra, he speaks Ga, he speaks Twi because a lot of his friends, he speaks English. Some 4 languages, a Ghanaian child. So children learn through assimilation, and we must expose them to, one, the local language, very important, and the official language, very important, through the very beginning. So they assimilate and get the skills and the concepts right from the very beginning. But if you wait until they grow, because you say you want to teach them in the local language, you ignore the official language, then I frankly differ with that argument. But just expose them to both the local language and the official language right from the very beginning, from kindergarten level, so they will build the concepts, very crucial.
So, I mean, apart from that recommendation you just made, is there any other thing we ought to be doing or ought to know so that the next survey, global survey, probably would make some improvement in our position?
So the language reform and education reform to take care of the language is very crucial. The other thing is that, as I said, for far too long, we have only been using the European norms to build our own, to measure our own IQ. I think it's high time we began to measure our own IQs using the appropriate things. For instance, if you ask somebody going through the IQ test to draw a polygon, what does polygon even mean to him to start with? And how does the drawing come in? But if you are to build in concepts that are traditional to us, and use that to build in with the IQ test, then you'll be able to do better. So, whilst reforming our educational system, we must also reform our approach to things so that you'll be able to build our concepts right from the very beginning.
Has this got anything to do with, let's say, duration or period within which one is exposed to a particular language?
In some sense, yes. But more importantly, the intensity. If you go to, adult Ghanaians who go to Russia, Germany, China, Japan to learn, they are given 1 full year intensive exposure in the language. That gives them the concept formation right from the very beginning. Then they can reason in that language formally as a first step, rather than reason in English and then translate. So if we are going to do it this way, then that is what we need to do so that we can build our language very intensely. So the intensity of it, not so much the duration, but the intensity. So frankly, I would recommend that for our first 3 years of education, very intensive exposure to the official language you'll use and our local language. First 3 years, intensive. And if intensive means ignore every other subject but the local language and English and mathematics, those 3 subjects, for instance, to me, those are what we need at the very basic level, first 3 years. Then we build the concepts very strongly. Then we can reason in that language and even dream in that language.
Thank you. What you mentioned about dreaming, I can't recall whether I've been dreaming in English or dreaming. It's really interesting. It's
That's
really
right.
interesting about.
Yeah.
But has dreaming got anything to do with our intelligence quotient?
Not intelligence quotient. All that it has got to do is with your concept formation. And as I said, concepts are symbolic representations in the mind of an item or a place.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.